This episode was supported by the Pulitzer Center.
I'm Trey Kay, and from PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting, this is Us and Them, the show that tells the stories about the things that divide us. Our country's political, social, and economic divides are defined in many ways, and they reveal themselves in our choices and habits. For instance, how and where we get our information. Do you get your news from traditional media? Online sites? And do you trust it? 58% of Democrats say they trust stories produced by news organizations, but only 11% of GOP voters say they trust the press to tell the full story accurately and fairly. That's according to a 2023 Gallup poll of more than 1,000 Americans living in all 50 states. 50 years ago, we weren't nearly as divided. In a 1973 Gallup poll, 74% of Democrats and 68% of Republicans say that they trusted the press. There are lots of reasons for this. The media itself has divided, catering to niche markets like CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. And there's a general decline in trust of major institutions like Congress, colleges, and universities. But something else is at work, too. There are far fewer reporters, photographers, and editors doing the everyday work of journalism. The economics of the business has shifted. And as newspapers, broadcasters, and online sites cut back or close down, the industry has slashed tens of thousands of jobs since 2000. And I didn't realize how bad things had gotten until a producer of ours, Todd Melby, pitched us a story idea and shared some of the research that he's found. And he's with us today. Hey, Todd, how you doing?
Hey, Trey, how you doing?
So you say that there are more than 200 counties throughout America that have no source of local news. I mean, that surprises me. 200 counties?
200 counties, yeah. And about 70 million people live in those counties. The study comes from the McDowell School of Journalism at Northwestern University, and they call these counties news deserts.
And that kind of reminds me of other reporting that we're doing on food deserts. Kind of the same thing?
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, a body can't thrive without nutritious food, as we all know. And many scholars would argue democracy can't thrive without informed voters.
Right. But now usually when we hear of people losing their jobs in journalism, it's usually in a big city. Like right now, there are situations in Los Angeles with the Los Angeles Times or the Washington Post, and they're getting a lot of attention. And in these cases, it's billionaire owners of these publications that are battling with unions, trying to save money and to attract more subscribers, right?
That's right. But the McDowell study reminds us that small towns are suffering too. In fact, it might be worse there. So when I read about the shuttering of the Welch News, which is a small town paper in southern West Virginia, I thought you might be interested.
Absolutely, I'm interested.
Of course. I contacted Missy Nester. She's the publisher there. She's far, far, far from a billionaire, by the way.
Right.
She bought the paper years ago and tried to save it. She really did her best, but she couldn't quite pull it off. So I asked her if I could come to Welch for a visit so she could tell me about it.
You're calling from Minnesota and you're going to come to Welch? Was she surprised?
She was really surprised. She thought maybe I just wanted to talk on the phone about it. But I told her that I wanted to come to Welch. I wanted to see Welch. I wanted to meet her in person and really, really get to know her and get to know her story.
Okay, but you're from Minnesota. Why do you care so much about this story in southern West Virginia?
It just really spoke to my heart. You know, I've spent most of my life working as a reporter, and I'm from a small town in western North Dakota. I covered the oil boom in western North Dakota, also another energy thing.
Right.
So I just thought there were a lot of parallels here, and I just wanted to go there and learn more.
So you come to southern West Virginia. Was that quite a shock for a prairie boy like you?
Absolutely it was. Yeah, I'm used to the wide open vistas, the roads that kind of go on forever. And in southern West Virginia, it's narrow roads and twisting roads and mountains. So it was quite a topography shock. A woman I met, Renee Bolton, did a really good job of describing the topography.
Everywhere you go, you're going to have to cross a mountain to get there. So if we go from Welch to Bradshaw, you're going to cross about 2 mountains. If you go from Welch to Ward, you're going to cross a couple mountains. Just about anywhere you go, you're going to have to cross mountains to get there.
It was just about a year ago when the Welch News shut down. Renee says until then, the paper kept people connected because it published news from the entire county. On its website, the newspaper's tagline is, "The Spirit of McDowell County."
I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. The paper's owner, Missy Nester, grew up in McDowell County. She went away to college, came back, started working at the paper, then eventually bought it. All of that just made me want to know more about Missy and McDowell County. So I headed deep into coal country. In fact, about 100 years ago, the region was known as the nation's coal bin. And that was a positive and powerful thing because coal powered the nation.
That's right, it did. So where does our story begin?
It begins in the right place. It begins just outside the newspaper office. Missy Nester is showing me around. All right, so we are in, is this downtown Welch?
Downtown Welch. We're almost adjacent to the courthouse, and that is my very favorite view.
And coming down the street here is a truck. It looks like a semi of some sort.
Yeah, it's a coal truck. That's a coal truck running, and those are 24 hours a day here. And if you're from the county, you love to see coal running.
When Missy Nester says the county, she means McDowell County. Welch is the county seat. In the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, McDowell County was a popular place. America needed coal, and McDowell County had a lot of it. By 1950, 98,000 people lived in the county. Today, the population is just 19,000. Now we can see your building. 1927, Welch Daily News.
The building was built in 27. The Welch News was here before that. I'll take you up and see the equipment and everything.
Immigrants from Europe came to work in the coal mines. So did Black Americans from the South. The Welch Daily News was there to document every moment, even the surprises. Like the time the letter A in the Welch Daily News sign fell off the side of the building.
I was actually standing out in front talking to one of the local police officers, and the A rolled right down. Almost got my head and his car.
No way. What did he say?
Oh, he said, "Well, I'm glad that didn't hit us." Me too.
Missy picked up the A and took it inside. The A was in her someday plans.
Even with the A missing, I always had a dream of redoing that Welch Daily News sign. I've got the A inside. I wanted to do it in gold and black.
When Missy owned the paper, it wasn't a daily anymore. It came out 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We head inside so Missy can show me around the newspaper building. It's chilly. The heat's been off for some time. It smells like a newspaper office.
Yes. It's the oil. It's the oil.
And newsprint.
Yes, and newsprint. Which I have a large amount of. Let me take you to the back where we laid out our actual pages. This is our camera, where we would lay the pages out on the big old cards with wax, old school, and then they would come to the camera where we would put them on the film, then we would take the film, put it on plate, put the plate on the press.
Is this how you were doing it up until
Yes.
the paper stopped a year ago?
Yes. We didn't have really the equipment we needed anymore to do that, and we just made our way. And it is that way a lot when you're in a newspaper like this, where you're hanging on for dear life and running on 50-year-old equipment or better, that you just make your way. I saw our press guys one time. We had a problem. They finagled something with a clothespin and Gorilla Glue and made it last so we could get the paper out the door. Then we worked on it that night.
Missy also shows me the paper's darkroom, bound copies of the Welch News from nearly 100 years ago, all kinds of stuff. Eventually, we head down some wooden steps. So we're in the basement of the Welch News. And here's the printing press.
It's a 66, like me. We're both a 1966.
The previous publisher bought the press the same year Missy was born. Back in a dark corner of the basement are 25 or so giant rolls of newsprint, rolls that never made their way to the press before Missy shut everything down in 2023. There's an open barrel of black ink with a wooden stir stick.
Well, we would dip out the ink with that large cup container, and we would put it into this tray container. See that little step stool with ink all over it? Yep. We would have taken that in between the units and climbed up and dumped it into the trough.
The printing press is yellow and smeared with decades of ink. The analog dials measure the number of newspapers printed per hour. And then there are the big round buttons: faster, slower, inch, stop.
You know, a lot of people might look at our newspaper and print it on this old equipment and be like, oh, it's not as clean, it's not as crisp, and it's not. But man, is it historic.
Missy clearly loves history and newspapers, the physical, actual newspapers that roll off the press. But don't get the idea she's stuck in the past. After she bought the Welch News in 2018, she took the paper online, generating new subscribers with a slick new website. And when something noteworthy happened, she'd whip out her phone and go on Facebook Live.
Traffic in Welch, y'all. Just giving you a little shot of it.
Missy recorded this a while back.
So for anybody just tuning in, apparently this truck was on its way up to the federal prison, and his GPS directed him to come up by the courthouse and go over Hobart Street.
The video shows a semi wedged into a narrow, uphill street next to a brick wall outside the historic courthouse.
See, we got the state police on scene out here. Mr. Vineyard's on scene directing traffic. Tell all your friends the excitement is happening now. About to see a miracle happen right here in Welch, West Virginia.
As the live comments roll in from viewers, Missy responds to them one by one.
Hey, Sonia Menace. I know, 325 people watching this, me standing out in the rain, because 325 people are watching this, and if y'all want to see it, I'll stand in the rain for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. $5 a month will keep me standing in the rain.
And stand in the rain she did for an hour and a half, until the driver, the tow truck, the state police, with a little help from curious onlookers, got the semi unstuck.
Maxine, thank you.
An incident like this is something journalists call a talker, a story that's not exactly news in a change-the-world sense, but it's something unusual that people will talk about. In the end, Missy's stuck semi video attracted 1.4 million views and more than 7,000 comments. Missy didn't do everything at the paper. A young guy named Derek Tyson served as reporter and editor. He was working at the paper before Missy bought it. Missy and Derek are really good friends. Heck, they're such good friends, their friendship has survived working together and a stint as roommates. Derek says it all started when Missy was having mechanical problems at her house.
She had awesome air conditioning and no heat, and so we'd have to go up there and thaw her pipes out and stuff so she could even get ready for work, and that eventually transformed into Missy sleeping in her office.
Yeah, it was bad. So Derek made her an offer.
And that eventually led to me going, you know, I've got this giant house and I live by myself over here. And then I was like, there's plenty of room.
Derek is 33. He inherited the house. His grandfather and father owned a bunch of stuff around town, including a 5-story brick apartment building called Tyson Towers that was once a grand hotel with a marble staircase. Anyway, Derek offered Missy a room for free. Missy took him up on it. In 2018, the out-of-town owner of the Welch News announced that he wanted to sell the paper, and if he couldn't find a buyer, he'd close up shop, quit printing, end of story. Both scenarios scared Missy and Derek.
A couple of people had come to me and said, okay, they would buy it if we would work it, and I do not mean local people. And we said no.
Yeah, basically, if we don't do it on our terms, we have no interest in it, really. And because it sounds nice. oh, these guys are going to bail us out. What's their intentions for your publication?
And since a story about the possible closing of the paper appeared in the paper, readers were worried too. Subscribers started calling the Welch News office, telling Missy and Derek how much the paper meant to them.
It was every day, constant. We couldn't even get our work done for the phone calls and the people stopping in, crying. But there was one lady in particular who called and said that she only had two things in her life: her telephone and the Welch News, and that she didn't know what she was going to do without us. And with the big hearts that we have, that those words gnawed into our very soul, and that we realized, there were a lot of very less fortunate people that were going to get hurt if we ceased to exist.
So they came up with their own plan. Missy would buy the newspaper, and its 7 staff members would stay on because they loved the Welch News and didn't want to see it die. Missy offered the owner $30,000. He refused, saying it wasn't enough. Months went by, but there were no other bidders. In the end, Missy got the paper for her $30,000 asking price.
We were coming in with dreams. We want to cover this thing. We want to be creative. We did a little magazine. We took us online. We had dreams of where we wanted to take our community, and we were afraid that someone else would buy it.
Community means a lot to Missy and Derek. While they're both from McDowell County, their childhood neighborhoods were different. Missy grew up outside of town. Derek grew up in Welch. We drove around in his pickup so he could show me things that matter to him.
We're in Welch, West Virginia. Okay. Flatiron Drugstore, which is a 3-story replica of the Flatiron Building, famous for New York City, because our nickname used to be Little New York. And here we have the City of Welch Municipal Parking Building, also believed to be the very first parking building built in this country. Due to geography, it was incredibly hard to park here.
Not anymore. Parking is free now in that historic parking ramp and on the street. With fewer people around, Welch is doing everything it can to make visitors feel welcome.
There used to be 2 movie theaters across the street from each other back where that clearing was. There was a giant apartment building on this riverfront here.
Next, he takes me to one of the steepest, most narrow parts of town. This neighborhood is built on a hill.
And now you get to really see how hard it was to eke out a life here. We literally built our homes on cliff sides. The old joke of, honey, I'm going to go mow the yard. Yeah, I've heard so many people say that.
Wow.
Yeah. And here's the best view. Look at that. Welch still looks like a city from up here, I think.
Once we're back downtown, Derek pulls his truck up on the sidewalk right in front of the 1927 Welch Daily News sign. The letter A is still missing.
Sometimes parking's tough in a town without many people, believe it or not. So we park up on the sidewalk, and we call that parking like you own the place. It's really only meant for short visits in, but some citizens don't care about that.
Because there's a woman, when I came out to take the outside picture, and she had the big pickup right on the sidewalk right behind us.
Little do they know, our coal room is actually under this sidewalk. We've always said one day somebody's vehicle was going to go through it. So you better get out before it's us.
While Derek's childhood memories hold images of life in town, Missy grew up just outside of Welch.
I grew up in Ekman, which is not really a city and not really incorporated. It's like the mouth of a holler.
Her dad worked for the phone company. Her mom worked at the post office.
In the holler I grew up in, kind of the first rite of passage was to be able to go outside of the gated fence to get the newspaper from the box. That's the first step. When you get proficient and my parents were of the belief that you wouldn't get killed on the road going to get the newspaper out of the box, then they would let you go get my grandparents' newspaper out of their box and take it into them.
Then came learning to read.
My mom helped teach me to read using the comic pages of the Welch newspaper. You know, in a small community like this, it means a lot. The newspaper is just part of the household so much.
Her mom wasn't the only one who read the Welch News. Her dad did too. And he shared advice with Missy about which pages in the paper were most important.
For example, one of his rules was always read the legals. That is what you want to know, is the legal section, because you want to know what these coal companies are doing and which mountain they're getting ready to blow the top off of and if it's going to affect you or not.
Missy's dad also used the newspaper for some early lessons in democracy.
When elections came around and the sample ballots ran in the paper, my dad would lay that sample ballot pages out on the table, and he would go through every candidate and tell us what he knew about that candidate, how he was going to vote, and also what other people believed. He would tell us both parts. Now, I like this guy because of this reason, but other people might say they like this guy because this is what he did, you know, and taught us to use the newspaper for information that would help us. And so it was always a big part of my life.
It was such a big part of her life in high school, Missy joined the school newspaper. She says one day the school district announced that there was asbestos in some school buildings, but refused to say which ones. At the time, Missy's dad served in the school board. She asked him about it. He refused to give her any information. So she started digging, looking at the years the schools were built, and researching the years asbestos was commonly used as an insulation material.
When I come home and say, okay, I figured it out, then my dad is furious, you know, and he thinks, oh, you've been in my filing cabinet, you've done this, but I've got my work, and I lay it out and go, no, here's how I figured it out, and walked him through the process of how I had figured it out. And right there is when it clicked for me, oh, this is what I like, because 16 years old, and I just made my dad that mad figuring out something by myself. I love this. It definitely put the taste of ink in my blood a little bit right there.
That ink in her blood was never about breaking a big story for the Charleston Gazette or the New York Times.
I didn't have that dream. I'm going to write for a big newspaper or anything. I didn't have that.
So owning the Welch News was the perfect fit for her.
It's more about my home and what I want here, how I want people in our little community to understand what's going on with the public funds that come here. I want people to understand how important it is to vote here. I want people to understand how important it is to know what our Board of Education is doing, even if you don't have kids in school, because that's still the public funds going to that system. I want to know about it, you know?
That curiosity led her to pursue a lot of stories, including publishing the salaries of public officials in the paper.
And I just went down a list of all the public information of the rate of pay yearly for commissioners, prosecuting attorney, you know, whatever list I had. Whew! I'm stirring up trouble telling everyone how much money people are making.
With Missy in charge, Derek changed the way he worked.
I was free then to actually be a journalist. You know, I could show some of the harder things to talk about in the community, like the school closures and things like that, because I suddenly had an owner who wanted me out there at all the meetings of the various offices in the county. And I remember our goal then was this. It was to have that hyper-focused local approach to it and to celebrate the people doing good here.
After buying the paper, Missy knew she had to make some changes to the business side of things. With the help of a journalism nonprofit, the Paywall Project, the Welch News added a website in 2020. That same year, Missy learned that the owner of the Pineville Independent Herald in neighboring Wyoming County was closing. Her first thought was, I can save that newspaper. Since the owner was going to shutter the paper anyway, he sold it to her for $1. They had presses running copies of the Welch News on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so Missy had the editor, pressman, and delivery drivers add the Pineville Independent Herald to their workload on Thursdays. Until July 2022, 13 drivers delivered newspapers to people in town and in every holler. It was a lot of work for not a lot of money. So they kept living as roommates in Derek's house. The third full-time employee lived there too.
In order to keep the machine turning, we had to learn to live on nothing.
Right.
And it was easier that way if we all lived in under one roof than, to try to all of us pay separate utilities and make no money. At least over there it was one pot. Together we had enough to live halfway comfortably, I guess.
A lot of ramen noodles, a lot of potato soup.
Yeah.
Eventually, money became so tight, Missy stopped paying herself a salary. With no income, she couldn't help Derek out with the rent or groceries. Meanwhile, Derek was making less than $10 an hour. I asked Derek and Missy about the whole money thing.
It's kind of hard to ask somebody to pay rent when they're not paying themselves anymore.
And did you literally write yourself a paycheck and then not cash it?
Yes.
Okay, so you have a stack of uncashed paychecks.
Yeah.
Did that ever bother you that your boss, she's your boss, right? That your boss was living in your house rent-free and paying you $9.25 an hour?
No, because like she said, when it came time to buy it, 4 of us sat down and we made an agreement together, and I am a man of my word, and I believed in our mission and things, and.
And I believe you guys knew that I would sacrifice myself first.
Things got so bad, Missy and Derek would quietly celebrate when they sold any kind of ad or notice, even when a local resident would come in to buy an obituary announcement.
People would come in the door and pay us $12 to put a death notice in the paper, and we would be yelling out to each other, okay, we got $12 because we're trying to come up with what we need to make payroll.
But ultimately, they couldn't take it anymore.
You feel like you're failing really every day. And even at our best, there were so little of us and so little manpower. There were 1,000 more things we would have liked to have covered every time. Even at our best, we were failing our community in our minds because there's so much more that the world should know about.
I think that I personify that 10 times harder than anybody else that worked here. I never felt good about it. Anything I'm still bad about it, because all I could think was the story I didn't get to that they wanted on that paper, and it's just like I always felt like no matter how hard I worked or tried, I let someone down.
In March of 2023, Missy Nester and Derek Tyson published the last issue of the Welch News. Lisa Blackburn misses the paper. I met up with her outside of a drugstore downtown. She was smoking a cigarette and watching the occasional coal truck rumble by.
But I used to love getting it. I couldn't wait to get the Welch News out of my mail or, from my door. Loved it. And my best friend, one of my best friends, she's the one that ran it. Missy Nester, she ran it. She tried her best to get it going right. She tried and tried and tried. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what happened.
After a break, Todd Melby continues the story, and we hear what is lost when a local news source vanishes.
A lot is lost when local news goes away. You start with the accountability issues, like literally no one is watching the government. And anecdotally, we know that when that happens, corruption goes up.
That's Steve Waldman, a former journalist who now runs a nonprofit called Rebuild Local News. And we'll find out what Missy and Derek are doing now. You're listening to Us and Them. This program is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council and the CRC Foundation.
Music lifts us up and brings us together, even when we can't get together in person. Mountain Stage brings you live performances on the air, online, and in our podcast. They remind you how it feels to be in a live audience listening to live music. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find a link to our stations and our podcast online at mountainstage.org.
Hey, it's Trey. And from PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting, this is Us and Them. Producer Todd Melby picks up our story about the loss of local journalism. In the West Virginia town of Welch, it's been a big adjustment for many residents.
Readers like small-town newspapers for all sorts of reasons, including sports and school news. I head over to the high school football field to meet a former state legislator. He's a Democrat, a retired teacher, and now a sports medicine specialist who attends practices and games to assist injured players.
Well, my name is Ed Evans, retired educator, taught for 35 years, spent 6 years in the legislature.
He also keeps an eye on the water coolers.
Right now I'm working for Bluefield State College, doing sports medicine for them as well. Excuse me a second. Put the lid on that. Get your foot out of that and put the lid on it. That may be the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I'm so sorry. Sometimes I get stupid stuff like that.
Ed Evans represented McDowell and Mercer counties in the West Virginia House of Delegates for 6 years. He didn't grow up here, but his first teaching job was in the local public schools.
When I first got here, I was 22 years old. I thought that was one of the coolest little newspapers ever. But the Welch newspaper was very special because it was McDowell County information. You know, if you wanted to know about it, they used to have this little thing called the Ridge Runner on the front page. And it looked like a little guy on a buck and bronco was the little logo with it. And if people wanted to complain about something, they wrote the Ridge Runner. Everybody couldn't wait to read the Ridge Runner. See what was being complained about, you know.
Ed is 64 now. He also enjoyed the paper's sports coverage. And really, it's coverage of just about everything.
I think that people have to understand how important a free press is. You know, you have a right to know what's going on in the country you live in, or the state, or the community. It's the job of the press to bring that. The Welch Daily News, WLC Radio, losing them was huge. You know, nowadays we have the internet, and you know when the buses aren't going to run because of snow. But, you know, WLC had their little jingle, hip, hip, hooray, no school today. You know, every kid in McDowell County grew up hearing that. But you don't hear it anymore. And the newspaper always had a list of, you know, makeup days and things like that. So it's important. Local newspapers are just, they're the best.
Some people are really sad about the death of the Welch News. I mean, really sad.
My name is Ida Monroe, and with the Council of the Southern Mountains.
Ida Monroe works in downtown Welch. She grew up in McDowell County. She's 75 now. As a young woman, she lived out of state for a while.
I grew up with the Welch Daily News. When I lived in New Jersey, my mother would send me the Welch Daily News. And I kept up with everything here in McDowell County.
Then her husband got a job in the coal mines, and they moved back. She read the paper every day, usually from back to front. She'd start with the classifieds and the legal notices on the back page, then worked her way to the more serious stuff on the front page.
People need to know what's going on in their county.
Since the paper was shuttered about a year ago, she's been at a loss.
And when they took the paper, it messed with me. In fact, the employees here that I work with, they say, "You are sick about that, aren't you?" I say, "Yes, I am." Mm-hmm.
A coworker sometimes brings her a paper from Bluefield, Virginia, but that paper doesn't have much or any Welch or McDowell County news. It's that local information that Ida craves.
Because there has been people that has passed, and I didn't know it until some of my coworkers, and they've been dead, a couple weeks now. It's a hardship for people in this county. That's a hardship.
Losing a trusted source for local stories and information, like birth announcements and obituaries, is a hardship for readers and residents. When news organizations fold, careers and income vanish for journalists. Reporters and editors don't really like being the subject of news, but the steep decline of journalism has forced us to take a look in the mirror.
The Barberton newspaper has had a foothold in that community for a century. Like many newspapers all across the nation, this week it is coming to an end.
About 750 staffers are on a 24-hour strike.
Next Sunday on 60 Minutes, a look at the fading future of local newspapers.
A study by Northwestern University tells us the United States is losing 2 newspapers every week.
Commercial journalism outlets, including newspapers, radio, and TV stations, have shrunk in recent years.
Do you know what's being made here? Still can't guess it? It's a newspaper, and for millions of Americans, what comes from printing presses like this is how they like to get their news.
Emphasis is on everything local.
I really like that last comment. It's from the editor of a local newspaper. The emphasis, he says, is on everything local. That's really what we're talking about this hour. Local news, local information, connecting people. Which is why, after getting to know the people of Welch, we tracked down Steve Waldman. Early in his career, Waldman worked as a political reporter. He wrote for Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report, and the Washington Monthly. These days, Waldman is trying to save journalism, especially local journalism. He's co-founded Report for America, which is modeled on Teach for America. But instead of bringing teachers to places that need them, it's about bringing reporters to newsrooms around the nation. He's currently the president of Rebuild Local News, a nonprofit dedicated to finding new ways to fund local journalism. He says to understand the plight of journalism today, it's important to know how we got here.
The amount of advertising that goes into newspapers has dropped 82% since 2000. 82%, $40 billion. Imagine any other industry if you said, oh yeah, the revenue's down 82%. It's a cataclysmic change.
A lot of people think a drop in audience prompted that change. Waldman says it's the advertisers, the department stores, car dealerships, and grocery stores that left first.
Really, it is that the advertisers had other places to advertise.
Places like
Autotrader.com and Monster.com, the job sites, and Craigslist, and basically the whole classified section of the newspaper got picked apart by various different websites. The jobs websites took the help wanted ads. The car websites took the car ads. The Craigslist took, I want to sell my sofa. One by one, the whole classifieds part of the newspaper, which in a lot of places was like a third to a half of the revenue, just evaporated. And then Facebook and Google came along and essentially did the same thing with the other advertisers.
Some big national news organizations are thriving in the new environment. Exhibit 1, the New York Times. In November, the Times announced it had 10 million subscribers. Its goal is to reach 15 million subscribers by 2027.
What they did was they decided, we're not going to pretend to be a local newspaper anymore. We're going to fully embrace our nationalness. We're just going to go all out. We are a national news or a global newspaper. And they did. And it turns out that you can make that work. You can outrun the falling ad rates by having a really, really, really big audience. And that's what they did.
But what do you do if you own the Welch News?
If you're in Welch, West Virginia, and your population is smaller, there's just a limit to how many people are going to want to read about the Welch school board meeting. Like, it's pretty much only the people in Welch are going to want to know about this school board meeting.
And that limited audience makes the economics tougher.
Last year, I was saying 2 newspapers close every week. Now I'm saying 2.5 newspapers close every week. So according to the new study from the McDowell Journalism School, the problem is accelerating. So thousands of newspapers have closed, and the rate of closing is actually increasing. And the majority of newspapers in America are weeklies in small towns, and they are the ones that are closing fastest. So it is a problem that really does touch every part of America, big cities, suburbs, small towns, but it is particularly hard-hitting rural areas.
That's left thousands of cities and towns with no source of local news.
There are now what are called news deserts, which are areas that have no newspapers at all. And then you have other places that have some newspapers, but they barely cover the community, that have not a single local reporter. So local newspaper without a local reporter.
How do you do that?
You take some wire service copy about national stories and then some ads, and then you basically, have a newspaper. And it's hard to even get your head around. Like, it's like peanut butter and jelly sandwich without bread.
So in places like Welch, West Virginia, where the local newspaper just cannot sustain itself, who covers the city council or the school board or the county commissioner or the local football games?
Usually no one. So statistically, in communities that lose their newspapers, nothing is replacing them. And that's a bit of a surprise. Like, we kind of thought, okay, well, the old newspapers are going to go away, but they'll be replaced by a new thing, a website that covers the school board or the counties. In most places, that's not happening. The newspapers are shutting and nothing is replacing them.
It sounds to me like there is really something lost when this goes away. Just spell that out for me. What is lost?
A lot is lost when local news goes away. You start with the accountability issues, like literally no one is watching the government. And anecdotally, we know that when that happens, corruption goes up. Actually, taxes go up. There have been studies that have shown that in communities that lost their local news, the cost of borrowing went up and taxes go up because no one's minding the store and government gets more inefficient.
In 2011, the Los Angeles Times won a Pulitzer Prize for uncovering shockingly high salaries for public officials in a small working-class city east of Los Angeles. The Times revealed that Bell, California, was paying its city manager $787,000 a year. Its part-time council members were earning $100,000 annually. While the salaries were exorbitant, they weren't illegal. The salaries were approved in public meetings. But there was no reporter at the meeting listening or taking notes or writing stories. That's because there was no newspaper or radio station or website dedicated to covering local news.
There's a deterrent effect from the reporter just being in the room without writing anything. That happens all over the place. So you have literally thousands of communities now in America that don't have that. So that's the accountability part of it. Then you also have the kind of community cohesion part of the crisis. And that refers to the ways in which the loss of local news means we know each other less well. And we know less about the high school sports team. And we know less about that amazing woman who just died at 92 who completely saved the public parks. And we know less about the town. We don't have a sense of identity about it. We start to feel less effective about our own ability to shape anything because we don't know anything.
Waldman and a coalition of journalism organizations are pressing for change. Waldman believes the government can help. For reporters, that's a major red flag. That's because reporters are supposed to hold the government accountable. And how can they do that if the news organization they work for receives money from the government? Waldman argues the support can be nonpartisan and extremely hands-off. He points to a law passed by Congress more than 225 years ago. In 1792, the United States Postal Service charged newspapers only a penny to send their editions as far away as 100 miles. By contrast, it cost 6 to 25 cents to mail a letter, depending on the distance. James Madison and George Washington thought the press to be so essential to democracy that the cost of mailing newspapers should be free.
Madison was kind of radical about the postal subsidy. It turns out that the two camps that existed in the first Congress among the founding fathers were the people who thought there should be a big newspaper subsidy and the people who thought there should be a massive newspaper subsidy. And Madison was in the massive category. He actually said there should be no postage fee at all for newspapers. Everyone else should pay, but newspapers shouldn't pay anything. He said even a penny is a tax on their freedom and on the freedom of the press. That's how strongly he felt that we have to be really taking extra efforts to help build up this newspaper industry.
Waldman wants a modern-day equivalent to the postal subsidy, but cautions that any help must be First Amendment friendly and content neutral. One idea is a tax credit for advertisers.
So the tax credit literally goes to restaurants and dry cleaners and grocery stores if they advertise in local news. So there's no one sitting around in a government agency deciding which news organization is the favorite. The restaurant has to decide that it would be a smart place to advertise. The newspaper has to prove that they're still worthy of getting some money.
Another idea is an employment tax credit that goes to news organizations just for hiring local reporters and retaining local reporters.
It's blind about quality, it's blind and neutral about content, except for whether it's local.
Up until its last issue, the Welch News was all about local news. Since Missy Nester turned off the printing press and ended the paper's nearly 100-year legacy, she's been trying to move on with her life. Missy says she's recovering from the stress of producing 4 newspapers every week. She's been spending more time with her family, including her daughter and 4-year-old grandson. One morning...
Yes, this is my mama. We always answer my mama.
Her mother called.
Hello?
Hello?
Watch what you say. I mean, you're on recording right now. I just want you to know that.
Oh, why?
We're talking about you. I just wanted you to know not to say any cuss words or talk bad about Daddy or anything like that.
Look, I may talk bad about your daddy, but I do not say those damn cuss words.
Missy and her mom chatted for a while. At one point, Missy's mom, who lives just across the border in Virginia, suggested Missy join her on a day trip to Charlotte, North Carolina.
So you ride the bus down there, walk around, and then ride the bus home on the same day?
Yes. They pick us up in Bluefield at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we're supposed to be back at 9 o'clock at night.
Ooh, that's past my bedtime.
Girl, you ought to have a little bit of energy. If not, we're going to buy you some of those fruits and veggie pills they sell on TV.
All right, I'll go. I'll challenge myself to do that.
Y'all enjoy. I love you.
I love you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Missy's former colleague at the paper, Derek Tyson, is doing other stuff now. He's been remodeling apartments and working the occasional shift at the Howdy House, a local pizza and wings place with video gambling.
I was a starry-eyed 23-year-old when I walked in this place, and now I'm a bald, fat, early middle-aged man who is not sure about any damn thing anymore. You know, I feel like I lost myself in a lot of ways, and I'm trying to figure out who I am again now.
Missy worked at the paper for 2 decades, bought the paper to save it, and thought about it during just about every waking moment. That includes those early morning moments when she woke up, looked outside, and admired the beauty of freshly fallen snow on the ground. Instead of enjoying the moment, Missy spent years sharing stories of all kinds with McDowell County. Sometimes she would share her joy with others by turning on her phone, recording a video, and then uploading it to the paper's Facebook page.
Morning, y'all.
Snow looked beautiful this morning. I wanted to see if it would show up. I did a little video. We got a little bit of snow on the ground here. See, it's a little on the road. It means the mountains probably got some on it. You guys be careful this morning. Happy Thursday. Great to be your hometown newspaper.
So when she shuttered the paper, it was tough in a lot of ways outsiders might not understand.
I love this place. I'm really sad about it. That's my personally, that it was so big of a part of my life, my entire life. But almost everyone that I talk to here has a Welch news story of when they delivered the newspaper, and they can tell you their entire route, 30, 40, 50 years later. They know every house they went to. Doing paper routes, you find out that there are people who are living by themselves, who are bedridden. And what we did was we would take that paper just in their house, all the way to their bedroom, check on them that day, leave. Wednesday we're going to do that again. I don't know. It was such a part of this community, such a thread that ran through that tied the community together. That's how I felt about it. And I hate we lost it.
You've been listening to Us and Them. Our team for this show was me, Trey Kay. Todd Melby reported and produced this episode. Kate Smith edited the episode, and Matthew Hancock mastered the audio. Michael Lipton, Tristan Lozow, and Ahmed Solomon wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the West Virginia Humanities Council, and the CRC Foundation. This episode was supported by the Pulitzer Center. Hey, we'd love to get your thoughts about this episode. Would you share them with us on our Facebook page? Or, if you can brave X, formerly known as Twitter, write to us at Us Them Podcast. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.